Welcome to the Meeker Classic. Meeker, Colorado, nestled in the White River Valley at the foot of the Flat Tops Wilderness, might be the most natural place in the world for one of the most challenging and prestigious competitions in the sheepdog trialing world. Since the late 19th century, sheep have summered in the alpine meadows east of Meeker. By the 1920s, sheep had joined cattle as a major industry in the area. Even today, you might catch a flock of a few thousand sheep moving through the town, usually handled by just a couple of people on horseback and a dog or two. And you might think to yourself, how can just one or two people and a couple of border collies keep so many sheep moving so calmly? The answer is simple: the amazing dogs, said to replace the efforts of 5 sheep herders. Dogs that bark, bite, and drive stock have been around since ancient times. But the poor farmers along the border of England and Scotland needed something different as they worked thousands of sheep alone on the rough moors. They needed a canine teammate who could help them gather and maneuver sheep over difficult terrain quickly and quietly. Breeding for these abilities, the prototype border collie emerged in 1893, so named to distinguish it from the fancy show collie. Border collies have since been bred for their ability to manage stock, not for color or conformation. That's why you might see a lot of different-looking border collies: black and white, red and white, floppy or prick ears, smooth or rough coats. But they all have something in common: their presence, their low-to-the-ground stance, their calm demeanor, lightning-quick reflexes, plenty of intelligence, and an innate desire to please their master, not to mention their instincts when it comes to herding sheep. The sport of sheepdog trialing began in Great Britain in the 1700s. Farmers would gather to determine whose dogs were best at handling sheep on the farm, and the best were used to breed the next generation of pups. The competition required the dogs to gather sheep at a great distance, drive them through obstacles, work with the farmer to separate sheep from the flock, and then pen the sheep. In the 1970s, the sport caught on in the United States, and in 1987, Meeker civic leaders and sheep ranchers got together to create the Meeker Classic Sheepdog Trials. From humble beginnings, a dozen volunteers and a handful of spectators, the Meeker Classic has grown to an international competition with a waiting list of competitors. More than 5,000 spectators annually, hundreds of volunteers, and over $20,000 in prize money. The Meeker Classic is a sanctioned competition, which means the winners earn points toward competing in the North American Sheepdog Finals. International guidelines govern certain aspects of the Meeker trials. For example, the infield course consists of 3 sets of panels, a shedding ring, and the handler's post. The distance from the handler's post to the fetch panels must be 200 yards, and to each set of drive panels must be 150 yards. The shedding ring must be 40 yards in diameter. The pen must be 6 feet by 9 feet. A single judge, along with the trial committee, determines the exact layout of the course and how many points can be earned by completing each phase of the course perfectly. The judge and committee also set the time available to run the course. Each dog and handler team begins the course with the maximum number of points for each phase. The judge deducts points for imperfections as the dog and handler team run the course. The time limit is just to keep the trial moving forward. Scores are determined by how many points are left when time runs out. The skills required to run the trial course showcase what a sheepdog must do to manage sheep on a ranch. The trials test the dog's natural ability to locate and gather the flock and then move them to the shepherd. After this, the dog uses refined skills to work with the shepherd to separate selected sheep from the flock and guide them into the pen. The shepherd communicates with the dog through a series of whistles and voice commands. If you think this should be simple, think again. The sheep are deceptively quick and can be decidedly ornery. Here's how the trial works. When a team is up, the dog and handler take their places at the handler's post. The dog must stay there until given the signal to go find the sheep, which are grazing docilely over a quarter of a mile away. The dog should get a good fix on where the sheep are from the handler's post. When the sheep are settled and calm, the handler sends the dog and the clock begins. The dog heads either left or right, heading to the outfield to gather the sheep. This is called the outrun. The dog should run in a pear-shaped direction, with the narrow part closer to the handler and the wider part as the dog approaches the sheep. The object is to come in behind the sheep without disturbing them. Points can be subtracted for many reasons, such as when a dog goes out of bounds or has to be redirected by the handler. The judge will make a large point deduction if the dog crosses between the handler and sheep. You may see this major flaw in any phase of the course. Once the dog reaches the sheep, the second phase of the trial, the lift, begins. The dog moves toward the sheep to get control of them and turn them toward the handler. This needs to be accomplished calmly without scattering the sheep. Two particular traits of the Border Collie come into play on the lift, and they will be seen through the rest of the trial. One is known as the eye, which is the dog's concentrated gaze that gives it psychological control over the sheep. Too much eye results in a standoff with the flock. At the other extreme is the loose-eyed dog, which does not understand subtle control and is likely to scatter the sheep in all directions. Just the right amount of eye causes the sheep to respect the dog. The second trait is called balance. Balance is where the dog places himself in relation to the sheep to cause them to move in the desired direction. During the lift, points can be deducted for standoffs, disturbing the sheep, approaching too fast or slow, pushing them off course, and for other reasons. As soon as the dog gets the sheep to move, the next phase, the fetch, begins. The object is to move the sheep as straight as possible to and through the fetch panels and to the handler. The pace should be steady and controlled. Points are deducted if sheep zigzag, or if one or more sheep cross the plane of the panels, then turn back to join the others, or if fetch panels are missed. There are no second tries. Continuing through the fetch panels, the sheep must be driven behind the handler and around the post as close as possible in a smooth manner. Now the infield work begins. Until now, the dog has relied on its innate ability to locate and fetch the sheep. From here on, refinement of the dog's skills and finely honed teamwork are required. The first phase of the infield work is called the drive. Once the dog has moved the flock around the handler and post, the dog must drive the sheep away from the handler in a straight line through the first set of drive panels. Then turn them calmly to the second set of drive panels across the course. The entire drive should be at a steady pace, not stressful to the sheep, with little alteration from the straight line direction. Driving the sheep away from the handlers goes against the dog's instinct to gather the sheep to the handler. It is a completely unnatural task for the Border Collie. Points will be deducted for the same reasons as on the fetch, including if the handler gives excessive commands, and of course, if the dog crosses between the sheep and handler. Once the sheep have passed through both sets of panels, they must be driven back to the shedding ring. Now the handler is allowed to leave the post and enter the ring to assist the dog in separating or shedding certain sheep. For the preliminaries, the dog must separate two sheep specified by the judge. In the semifinals, 2 uncollared sheep must be shed. Other rules apply for the finals. The handler works to line up the sheep to be shed. Notice the dog's balance as it rotates to a point opposite the handler as a handler moves in order to control the flock. At the right moment, The handler calls the dog in through the selected sheep. The dog must instantly move between the sheep, separate the two sheep, and hold them away from the others. Both sheep must be separated at the same time and controlled in the ring, though they may later run out. Points can be deducted for many reasons, including instances when the dog moves between the sheep and the handler, or the dog allows sheep to leave the ring before they are shed. Once the dog has control of the sheep and the judge signals that the shed is satisfactory, the next phase, the pen, begins. The dog regroups the sheep inside the ring as the handler moves to the pen to open the gate. The dog must bring the sheep toward the pen on the side opposite the gate hinge, toward the open mouth of the gate. The handler must hold the rope of the gate and may not touch the sheep with the crook, tempting as this might seem. Points are lost if the sheep circle the pen, break from the mouth of the pen, or if the handler doesn't close and latch the gate once the sheep are penned. At Meeker, 125 dogs are allowed into the competition. After 3 days of preliminary trials, the top-scoring teams make it into the semifinals on Saturday, where they go through the same course. As in the preliminaries, 5 sheep are run, only this time 2 of them are collared. Any 2 of the uncollared sheep are shed. Time is added to allow for a very difficult maneuver, the single shed. After the sheep are penned, the dog moves the sheep out of the pen, regroups them, and returns all 5 to the shed ring. The team must then shed any 1 collared sheep. Difficult, because a sheep's natural instinct is never to be alone. Then on Sunday, for the finals, everything becomes more difficult. Instead of moving 1 flock of 5 sheep, the finalists have to move 2 separate flocks of 10. The dog brings the first flock of 10 through the fetch panels and then is asked, against the dog's nature, to leave them there and turn back for another group of 10. After passing through the fetch panels, the second group joins the first and are driven as one group through the rest of the course. More points can be kept or lost during each phase of the run. Instead of the regular shed, the team must perform the international shed. During this maneuver, the 15 uncollared sheep have to be separated from 5 collared ones, and collared ones are then driven to the pen and penned. Unlike the regular shed, the unmarked sheep do not have to be shed all at the same time. They may be shed off singly or in small groups, but keep in mind, the actual separation must happen inside the ring. As the unmarked sheep are shed, they are usually driven outside the ring in the hopes that they will be less of a magnet for the collared sheep. If a collared sheep joins some already shed sheep outside the ring any time before the pen, the collared sheep plus the group it rejoined must be brought back to the shedding ring to be reshed. Sheep being sheep, this happens often. Some days it's better to sacrifice a minute on the clock and cool down with a nice dip. The dogs have to be very careful when asserting their authority, as a nip will result in automatic disqualification unless the dog is defending itself from an unprovoked attack. Other times, when the dog and handler are just not on their game, the handler will simply say, "Thank you very much," and retire from the competition. Retiring a tired or frustrated dog or relieving overstressed sheep means sacrificing months of training and a lot of expense. But good sportsmanship puts the animals first. But it's not all sheep and dogs at the Meeker Classic. There are plenty of crafts, fun, and food all around the grounds. When you're hungry, you can choose from funnel cakes and ice cream, lamb barbecue, burgers, pancake breakfast, and hero sandwiches. When the competition takes a break, you might get a pretty good education on how these dogs are trained. The Scottish bagpiper may leave you laughing or feeling soulful. You'll see spinning, weaving, painting, saddle making, and pottery demonstrations, and there are plenty of souvenirs available. There's an annual art contest with a winner chosen for the next year's Meeker Classic poster. The art is then sold off in a silent auction. Take a minute to learn about service and therapy dogs and look into the restored 19th century sheepherder's wagon. If you attend during the week, eavesdrop and learn something remarkable from the school children attending free through our educational program. And don't forget the horse-drawn carriage ride, a stroll through historic downtown Meeker, and the fabulous barbecue and free Saturday night concert in the park. But what really sets Meeker apart from other sanctioned sheepdog trials? There's Meeker's large, well-informed, enthusiastic crowds who appreciate the efforts of every team. No manicured pasture or arena here. The course is run over natural terrain. And you've heard how high altitude affects an athlete. It's the same for the dog and handler, working at Meeker's 6,200 feet. Sheep like horses, so to minimize stress on the sheep, the Meeker Classic uses people on horseback to set the sheep. Also, the sheep are fresh. Every preliminary run is a first-time run for each of the sheep. Some of the sheep are run a second time at either the semifinals or finals. But ask handlers, and they will say, above all, it's Meeker's wary sheep that keep them coming back. They are not, and let's emphasize that, not accustomed to dogs and people. They're gathered from alpine pastures outside Meeker the day before the trial, and they generally think anything moving is a predator. Now, when sheep get the better of dogs and handlers anywhere in the world, handlers exclaim, "We got Meekered." But at the end of the day, we mostly remember the border collies. Intelligent, always eager to work sheep, never quitting until called off, and good friends off the field. It's the Meeker Classic Sheepdog Trials. The best dogs, the best handlers, the wildest sheep in North America, and a great time for everyone.